Okay, my name is Garvin Boyle. I'm a retired high school teacher of mathematics and physics. I have been making computer models for about 50 years, and lately I have taken an interest in modeling sustainable economics, and that led me into long conversations with Charlie on the topic of maximum power principle. And I am personally convinced that there is gold to be found in excavating that concept, reworking it, reshaping it. So this is very hypothetical, but...
And Garvin, how did you get involved with Charlie?
How did I get involved with Charlie? I went to a EE conference to learn about Herman Daly, and I met Charlie there in Vermont. Okay, so I'm going to start at the end in case I don't get there. This is a sampling of theories as to why global affairs are nasty, unjust, amoral, and unsustainable. There are lots of them. We can talk about European colonialism, American hegemony, conflict between the great religions of the Middle East, etc., etc. And we have a modern cohort of these things that we like to blame for our modern woes, globalization and multinational corporations. I am becoming convinced that these are just all actors on the stage. Same play has been playing for 12,000 years, right? The actors change, the costumes change, the script changes, but the story is always the same. Burn up as much energy as you can, guys, right? It's always the same story. It's like convergent evolution. There was a time when an organism very much like a dolphin used to be a mosasaur, and then there was a time when it used to be some kind of swimming lizard, and each time an actor is off the stage, another one is shaped by evolution to take the same role. So all of these things, we've got our modern one that everybody in this room likes to thump on, neoclassical economic theory. I imagine that scientists around the world shake their head in wonder, saying, how can an economic theory that believes in perpetual, everlasting growth come to dominate in an age of science and become a political factor that dominates the world in an age of science, right? How could this happen? Well, I think I can say why, but it's going to take me a while to get there. Okay, so starting with A.J. Locke in 1922, he wrote that natural selection tends to make energy flux through the organic system a maximum. So he's saying natural selection leads to rising energy flows. He also said in evolution two kinds of influence that are at work, selecting and generating. I can use that later, nice to know. And he said the question was raised whether man, so we're suddenly jumping out of organic systems into talking about human systems. The question was raised whether man has been unconsciously fulfilling the law of nature, according to which some physical quantity now tends towards a maximum. This is now made to appear probable, he says. Jumping forward a bit, Odom and Pinkerton take up this thread of thought. They say it is our proposition that natural systems tend to operate at that intermediate efficiency which produces maximum power output. So they're talking about power plotted versus efficiency. And we're going to see a lot of that. A graph of power versus efficiency looks like this. Efficiency is along the bottom, going from 0 to 1. And power is up the side, going from 0 to 1. Because I use a power index, I divide the power by the maximum power so that it fits into a map like that. This generates variation for natural selection to work upon, and I'm going to come back to that. So Odom and Pinkerton go on to say, let us make the following postulate. Under the appropriate conditions, maximum power output is the criterion for the survival of many kinds of systems, both living and non-living. In other words, we're taking survival of the fittest to mean persistence of those forms which command the greatest useful energy per unit time. Useful energy is a key thought there. Now, in Odom's lifetime, he went on to expand upon that. He said it's every persistent system. That survival of the fittest, natural selection functions on every physical system. You want to talk about star formation, you want to talk about hurricanes, ecosystems, economic systems, social systems. If it's a persistent system, this is playing some kind of a role. And this provides selection among the variants. So the Goldilocks effect generates variation, and survival of the fittest selects for maximum power amongst those Goldilocks terms. Okay, so the MPP seems to be at the nexus of a bunch of questions, a bunch of ideas. Darwin raised the origin of species, and he developed the concept of natural selection. Locke and Odom both expanded that. Instead of talking about evolution of species, they started talking about evolution of energy pathways and evolution of systems, but energy pathways in particular. And Odom and Pinkerton added this concept of power versus efficiency and it evolving towards maximum power. And then we've got the constraints mentioned in there occasionally from time to time. As long as there's enough sources of energy that can be discovered and exploited, and as long as there's enough matter of a suitable sort that can be excavated and manipulated and exploited to carry that energy as a vector through the system. So we've got these, and then it's hypothesized that it's broadly applicable to everything, and particular economic systems is what I'm interested in. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this presentation is draw a bunch of dots here and there. I can't put all the logic together that joins the dots, but I think you'll see that it comes together at the end. So we're going to switch gears just for a minute. I want to make two definitions of power. Imagine an ecosystem, and you've got energy inputs, and you can get useful power out of it, or you can get wasted power out of it. I'm not going to explain it in a lot of detail, but energy comes in, some gets used and some doesn't, and the doesn't passes on through, right? So power is just joules per unit time. We've got three there, but one of them we don't care about. But we can do the same thing with economic data. You can talk about, for any going commercial concern, any corporation that is persistent, any business that is persistent. You've got income, and you've got your profits, and you've got your costs. And you can define power in terms of dollar per unit time. You can define your cost in dollar per unit time. So this applies, what I'm going to say I believe applies equally to energy-based systems and to money-based systems. Okay. So switching back again briefly, what Locke was trying to say is that the waste energy flow is maximized for the pathways through the system. So he's talking about the energy pathways and the system as a whole, and he's saying that natural selection is going to maximize the flow of energy. Maximize which flow of energy? It's going to maximize the waste. So what he's saying is that an energy pathway through an ecosystem is going to expand its ability to get as much sunlight as possible, and then it's going to expand its ability to burn that sunlight totally, right? It'll go through primary producers through to apex predators, and after that you're going to have decomposers and detrivores chewing up the last bit of energy so that it's all gone. So what he's saying is that natural selection is going to choose those pathways that's going to maximize the waste energy flow, right? So this leads to maximal flux of matter and energy and maximum overall energy production.
Entropy production.
Yes, did I say something else?
I heard energy.
Oh, entropy production, yes. So you see those little pathways up at the top? The one that has the most power to start, it expands, and because there's a relatively limited flow of energy, if it's getting more of the flow of energy, the other guys are getting less. Its biomass is going to expand at the expense of the other pathways. So you can think of the size of those pathways in my little drawing there as representing biomass. I don't know how I'm going to factor that into the presentation that you saw. I'll worry about that later. So what Odom and Pinkerton were talking about, and I don't think Odom realized this, because when I read Odom's writings, I get confused. I don't know what, he seems to contradict himself from time to time. And what I figured out was there's two definitions of power. So what Odom and Pinkerton are talking about is maximizing the useful energy flow. So we see we've got a frog and a fly down here. The frog eats the fly, and what it wants to do is get the most energy out of that fly into its body and into its eggs to propel itself into the next generation. It wants to grow up to mature and propel it. So the energy that it uses catching the fly, it wants to minimize that. The energy that it uses digesting the fly, it wants to minimize that. The energy that it uses for homeostasis, for hygiene, for these other things, it wants to minimize those. So we know in nature that animals minimize expense, right? That's what they're known for. That they're absolutely parsimonious when it comes to spending energy, except for reproduction. Then they're profligate, right? So, some of them produce 400 million propagules, like mushrooms do, and put them out there. They're really profligate. So they minimize the bottom, they maximize the top. And when they do it, frog and fly, for one species of frog and one species of fly, I presume that there's this Goldilocks curve in the back, and I'm going to show you why I can make that presumption. There's this Goldilocks curve in the back. And the frog is going to evolve so that it maximizes the energy that it gets. If it does anything else, it's not going to propel itself into the next generation. So if it's at the bottom end of the curve, it's going to move to the middle. If it's at the top end, it's going to move to the middle, right? So for every frog-fly combination, we've got a little curve, and as the frog evolves, it's going to move towards the middle, because the other ones will be outcompeted and will disappear. So my assumptions about Goldilocks curves. Assumption, for every flow of benefits, there are inputs which are consumed in the process of producing that flow. For example, number of workers. So I'm going to focus on number of workers for a while. That's an economic thing instead of an ecological thing. So my hypothesis is for every such input, there is an optimum rate of consumption for which the rate of production of benefits is optimized. The consumption of all other inputs being held constant. That's a pretty big assumption. Okay, now thinking about Odom, he's talking about hurricanes, he's talking about cellular dynamics, he's talking about organisms, he's talking about economies. He says it applies everywhere. So this has to be ubiquitous. It has to be everywhere, or Odom's theory falls apart, right? So I tried to, let me give you an example. First, you've got a city of 1 million people, police officers, reduce crime, that gives you a flow of benefits. So one police officer gives you a little flow of benefits. One police officer is not enough. 10,000 police officers is probably too many. They're going to be tripping over each other and getting confused. And so there is probably some number that's just right. Now, if you don't believe 10,000 is too much, let's say 10 million, right? There is some number at which it's too much. So I tried to do a nice, fancy mathematical proof of this, that these things are absolutely everywhere, and failed twice, so I decided to use brute force. I built some Excel spreadsheets, and I thought of every way that in a profitable business, income, costs, and benefits could interact with each other. Every possible one. Now, I may have missed one. I think I have 20 or 21 of them, right? But in the spreadsheet, there's income, there's cost, there's benefits, which is income minus costs. There's the power and the power index. I divide the power by the maximum power to turn it into an index. And then I do two plots. There's the efficiency. Then I do two plots. I plot income, costs, and benefits against workers, and I plot power against efficiency. So there's the top plot. Income, costs, and benefits versus workers. Workers go from 0 to 100 in this example. And there's the Goldilocks curve that comes out of it. Now, Odom's writings are full of these little humpbacked curves where he tries to explain maximum power. I'm starting to believe that they're all actually loops with just a flat leg on the bottom. But here's an example. The blue line joins the red dots. The red dots are number of workers. So 1 worker, 2 worker, 3 worker, all the way up to 50 workers somewhere far on the right, and then up to 100 workers when you're back down at the bottom, right? stretch the truth there slightly, but okay. And there's lots of them. For every combination of income, costs, and benefits for a profitable business, I can produce one of these. So based on that, I can assume that for every profitable relationship between frogs and flies, there's one of these. I have no idea how you figure out what it is, how you would measure it, how you would track it over generations of frogs and generations of flies. That boggles the mind. But at least because of this argument, I can believe that in the Platonic plane it exists, that it's actually a functioning thing. So what does that mean? Here we've got the frog eating the fly again, and we don't just have one species of frog and one species of fly. We've got many frogs, many species of flies, and many species of herons. Now, I've cheated slightly. If you look closely, you'll see that this one right here is near the peak, and this one right here is near the peak, right? And the others are kind of off peak. I use that just to demonstrate something. So there's the trophic web, and there's 3 energy pathways. One of those energy pathways happens to be near maximum power at all of the links through the web, right? So what natural selection is doing is it's working towards the average maximum power for all of those links. That pathway that passes through the most energy to the end is going to grow in its biomass, and the others will shrink. That's what Locke is saying. Locke is saying energy pathways evolve under natural selection. So, trying to put this all together in one picture, there's the frog eating the fly, there's the frogs, the frog-fly, Goldilocks curve evolving, and there's the pathway that it participates in expanding to greater size. Now, I believe that there's a connection between complexity and power, and I don't understand exactly what it is, but thinking SC here stands for supply chain, so I'm thinking about an economic circumstance. When an organization comes up with a sophisticated or innovative business model like Walmart did, suddenly it garners a larger share, and its size in the marketplace expands, and something else gets pushed aside, right? The green one down at the bottom there, that's green investments. You want to change the world, you put your money into green investments. Walmart puts up with the new business plan, and your green investments go broke. Such complex supply chains will persist and grow, increasing the flow of energy and the average complexity of the business unit. So I believe that even at the same time that the maximum power principle is increasing the flow of energy, is increasing the complexity of the system as well. That there is a direct link between complexity and the flow. Now, you could take complexity out of there and put technology in, and perhaps it would mean the same. Business model pruning. So what is happening is, in an economy, let's say, natural selection is deciding which supply chain is going to survive and which supply chain is going to become obsolete and fall away. So there's, as I say, there's our green investments at the bottom. As Walmart dominates, green investments fall off and go bankrupt. Part of the effect of the maximum power principle is not just that it builds rungs of complexity that our economy can climb up, but it also makes the rungs of complexity behind us obsolete and removes them. So as we climb up the ladder, we cannot climb back down again. Now, there's one more thing. I also believe that there is a teleological pruning effect. Teleology is when you use intent or plans or cause or desires of a person as an explanation for why things happen. So that turtle walked over from here to over there because God told him to do it, and he did. Right? That's a teleological explanation. In the 1500s, it was decided that teleological explanations would be removed. But in our business activities, we use teleological explanations all the time, right? He succeeded because he was determined, he was hardworking, and he had a plan to do it, right? Well, everybody tries hard, everybody works hard, everybody has a plan. Nobody goes into business planning to fail. But 8 out of 10 businesses are dead in the water after what, 5 or 6 years, something like that. So what is happening? Well, those things that go obsolete and fall off are pruned away. Here's the tree of good intentions and green business models. And notice right in the middle of NCE, the stupid one that believes everything can grow forever, right? Now it happens that NCE lines up with the effects of the MPP. So anybody who believes in the NCE and invests their money in a way that lines up with perpetual growth is going to succeed. But everybody else is going to fall away. So there go our green investments. Right? So the MPP is putting the actors on the stage, and if they don't believe that somehow maximizing the power of human society is the right thing, their beliefs fall away. If they do believe that maximizing the power of society is the right thing, their beliefs are strengthened because they're successful, because they just happen to line up with it. So I think there is a teleological effect. Why do we believe that that growth is possible forever? Because if you believe anything else, your investments fail. So my point in all of this, our global economic system is not remotely close to sustainable. We're captured and being dragged along by a complex, powerful, and remorseless dynamic that automatically thwarts all attempts to stop it. And if we don't put time and energy into understanding this, we are doomed to go with it right to the final curtain. We're all products of evolution. Yes.
So I'm going to try to tie this with.
We are at 5 o'clock. I think the next group is just starting, but
okay, so
we can handle a couple of questions.
Very quickly, I'm going to try to tie this to the previous one. So he was mentioning these cities with structures as an energy draw, drawing the biomass energy and dissipating it into the structure of that system. And like a Climax forest, you've seen the graph that Charlie will put up and promote it. The biomass grows over time, and ultimately respiration reaches a level where it's equal to production, or the input. And the structures of the trees still remain. Or in an ecosystem, if you look about bacteria growing in a petri dish, maybe you'll have the bacteria colony grow, and then proteins and various other structures and organisms might remain off the refuse. So in a situation where capitalism is driving us this way, and we're growing and we're developing these structures, which will no doubt outlast our ability to consume all this energy, what kind of living system might remain inside of those structures?
I'll have to think about that. If anybody is anxious to get up to see the beginning of the next presentation, please